Recording started.
All right, hi photography students. We are going to do this session to help you prepare for the test that's on Module 3. Hope you guys have had a really good week this week. Here in Edmonton, it's been warming up, and it's looking a lot more like spring. I know my kids have been out riding their bikes, and I'm looking forward to joining them pretty soon. I like it a little bit on the warmer side when I go out and ride my bike, but anyways, hope things are going well for you guys. And so we'll just get started with this stuff here. And the first section here, what we're talking about is we're talking about photojournalism. Of course, that's what this module is all about. And we're just talking at this point about, when did photojournalism start to really become sort of more of a craft, I guess you could say. And sorry, I'm just going to get my pointer here. So it was really after the Great Depression. Of course, it was a difficult time. You can see the picture of this lady here, the look on her face. Very difficult time. A lot of people were out of work. And so that was kind of a time when, people started taking pictures to tell the story of what was going on during the Great Depression. So the Great Depression started in the 1930s, and it was really from the 1930s to 1950s when photojournalism started to take off. And then you started having, pictures going together with articles, which is really what photojournalism is all about, and they were starting to be, shared with newspapers across the world. And so what we're going to talk about at this point, guys, is we're going to talk about the rules of writing good captions. And the first rule is we want to be specific. Okay, so a caption that wouldn't be so good here would be, something like, batter Chuck Davidson hits the ball. Because it's kind of obvious, right? That's what we see in the picture. We want to be more specific. We want to tell more about what's going on that the person doesn't just see for themselves by looking at the picture. So a better caption would be, Toronto Blue Jays first baseman Chuck Davidson connects with a solid line drive to put the Blue Jays ahead of the Boston Red Sox 5-2 in the bottom of the 5th inning. This picture here is actually one I took myself when I was at a Blue Jays game probably about 3 years ago. And that game, the Blue Jays beat the Red Sox, which was a bit of a surprise. So, again, be specific with your captions. That's rule number 1. Rule number 2, we kind of already talked about it already. Tell something other than what's obvious in the picture. So, an example of a not-so-good caption might be, ouch, Oxford High bicyclist crashes. That's maybe the beginning of a good caption, but you have to continue and go on from there. So a better caption might be, down and out, senior cycling team member Bob Everett takes it on the chin after colliding with Mosby High's Steve Sherrill at the season's first race. After a trip to the hospital and 10 stitches, Bob went on to win 5 races for the year, and led the team to an overall second-place finish in the region. Okay, so again, tell something other than what is obvious in the picture. Rule number 3 for good captions, use lead-ins to grab the reader's attention. And if you look at the last example, both of them actually had lead-ins. So things like ouch or things like down and out, something that's got a lot of expression in it, that's an example of a good lead-in. So usually short phrases. So lead-ins are words that get people's attention and cause them to want to read the rest of the caption. Rule number 4, write only the first sentence in the present tense and then switch to the past tense for the remaining sentences. So you can see that in the example above. So the first sentence, it said down and out, and then it went on to say, Bob Everett takes it on the chin. So that's the present tense, right? The next sentences, well, if we look back at the next sentences, we can see it says, so after it says he takes it on the chin, then it says after a trip to the hospital, he went on to win. Okay, so that's the past tense. So again, first sentence in present tense, all remaining sentences in the past tense. Okay. And the last good rule is of captions is to continue the story that was begun in the picture. So in other words, the picture itself is telling us something, but again, we want to tell something else that's not so obvious, so we want to continue the story that was started in the picture. Alright, so those are 5 rules for good captions. Now to summarize, if we're talking about the lead-in sentence, remember that's the first sentence only. It should grab the reader's attention. It should be in short sentences or phrases, written in the present tense, and it's more motivational than the following sentences. Okay, so the sentences that follow should be in the past tense, and they continue the story that was begun in the picture. Okay, so let's say we were going to write a good caption for the picture below. I'll give you guys just a few minutes to think about what would make up a good caption. Okay, so see if you can remember the 5 points of a good caption. So again, what's a lead-in sentence like? And what are the following sentences like? Okay, so again, a good lead-in sentence is motivational, and it's short phrase, present tense. Following sentences continue the story that you can see in the picture, and they're in the past tense. Kind of looks like my parents' cat. It looks like the one they had that bit me once, so don't have my favorite memories of that cat. But actually, the cat they have now is a lot nicer. So, okay. The next part here talks about the rule of thirds. So we're going to talk about some important parts about why it's the rule of thirds, and how does this help you when you're trying to take good pictures. So basically, you can see it's the rule of thirds because you're dividing it into thirds, both going this way and also this way. Right? When you do that, it creates 9 different parts. And the place you want to put the subject of your picture is in one of these 4 places where the lines cross. Because your eyes are naturally drawn to those points anyways, so you want to put your subject there because your eyes are going to be drawn there anyways. That's the reason why the rule of third works. So remember, 2 important parts of the rule of third. One is that the picture is divided into 9 parts, and the other is that you place your subject in one of the 4 points where the lines cross. Okay, so here's an example. You can see that we put the face of the wolf at one of the places where the lines cross. So I want you just to look at these pictures here and to think about, do they obey the rule of thirds? Now remember, not every picture has to obey the rule of thirds, but most of your pictures should. Sometimes you just want to get a good picture, and sometimes you don't have the time to compose it. But when you look at your pictures, most of them should. Okay, now this one here, I would say it doesn't quite meet the qualifications, because if you divide it up, the rule of thirds this way, you can see that her face is just a little bit higher than it could be. Now on the other hand, it's not too bad, and if you lowered her down, you might not get all of her in there. So, sometimes you want to look at a few different things at the same time. But I think her face could be positioned just a little bit more towards where those lines meet. On the other hand, the picture below, I would say that it does meet the rule of thirds, because when you're dividing things up, you're going to divide the lines this way and about like that. That's just about where the middle of the flower is, or the most important part of the flower. Okay, so that one I would say does obey the rule of thirds. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about what makes a picture well exposed. When you're talking about a picture that's well exposed, you're talking about the amount of brightness or darkness of the picture. So these pictures have different amounts of exposure, different levels of exposure, but I would say that this picture is the best exposed. I would say that this one's a little bit too bright. The picture almost looks like the background in terms of its brightness. Should be some contrast between the picture and the background. This one here I would say is too dark. Okay, so again, a picture that's well exposed is not too dark, not too bright. Now getting the proper exposure is going to be different. What we're going to do to our camera to get the proper exposure is different depending on the lighting conditions we have. Okay, so if we have a dark situation, we're going to have to let in more light into the camera. If it's a bright situation, we need to let in less light to get a proper exposure. Now when we're talking about the composure of a picture, how well composed it is, there's two things we focus on. One is the main elements of the picture. So in other words, a picture is taken in such a way that it focuses your eyes on the subject. On the other hand, you want to remove non-distracting elements of the picture. So you don't want something like a rake coming out of someone's head in the background, because that really distracts from the main subject of the picture. Okay, so those are kind of the two things that make up a well-composed picture. Let's just kind of elaborate or talk a little bit more about what we've just discussed. So some things that help us to focus on the subject and not focus on distracting elements. Okay, well, most of the time, again, you want your subject off-center. You don't want them in the center most of the time. And again, if they're obeying the rule of thirds, then they're off-center, right? Okay, so that helps your eyes focus on the subject so that it's well composed. You want the elements arranged so that your eyes are drawn towards the subject. Okay, so there's other ways as well in which you can compose the parts of your picture so it causes your eyes to be drawn in to where your subject is. In other words, you want your picture to tell a story. You don't want to just have a whole bunch of things in the picture. You want it to be arranged in such a way that it tells a story. Now that's as far as the subject that you're focused on. As far as the distracting elements that are not included, again, if you have something like a rake, you don't want that in the picture coming out of someone's head. And most of the time you don't want half a person. Now it doesn't matter sometimes if you just have part of the person's head if they're looking at something, right? Because then they're kind of looking at something, and you know, sometimes you don't want all of their head. You know, but it's more, some of the time you cut off certain body parts and things like that in a way that's kind of distracting or not helping you to focus on the whole person. You're kind of saying, well, what's, you know, where's the rest of them, sort of thing. Okay, so sometimes you can cut off parts and sometimes you can't, and you start to get a better feel for when you can do that and when you can't. But if you just have like a person's foot sticking into the picture, you know, a lot of times that's not a good thing. That's when it would be distracting. Okay, so when we take pictures, we either hold the camera in the normal way you hold a camera, if you want to say like kind of the typical way, which is the landscape mode. That's the way most people hold cameras. Okay, so when you're taking a landscape picture, for instance, if you're taking a group picture, or if you're taking a picture of a landscape, you know, like a distant scene, or say a cityscape where you've got a whole bunch of things in the city, like different buildings. Those are all in landscape mode. The other way, when you turn the camera this way, is for portraits mainly. Because then the person's face can fill the portrait. Not just their face, but you know, whatever part is included. Whereas if you have them in this part, you've got space on either side, right? Okay. So, again, portrait mode is for portraits, landscapes for outdoor scenes such as mountains, group pictures, other pictures that require a wide angle. Okay, so here's some examples of landscape mode pictures. Group pictures here are also in landscape. Okay. At this point, we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about what types of things in your pictures help to create mood or emotions. Well, one thing is to zoom in, because when you zoom in, you're able to get close enough that you can capture people's expressions, right? If your picture is taken from too far away, you're not able to see the wrinkles on their face or the smile so well, right? But when you zoom in, you can. Also, brightness. You know, for instance, that produces happy moods. Darkness produces sad moods. And colors. So again, bright, cheery colors or gloomy, dark colors. Now, some other things don't really contribute as much to the mood, such as the focus of the picture. Sometimes a picture that's a little bit blurry could create some of the mood, but I would say most of the time these three things are what contribute to the mood. So here's an example of a picture with some mood. How would you describe this, the mood of this picture? I would say maybe mysterious, because these kind of posts here, they lead into the distance, and you kind of wonder, well, what's out there? You know, what's this picture all about? Let's look at some other pictures that have mood. This picture, well, again, it could be maybe a sense of mystery, maybe a sense of peacefulness. Everything looks fairly quiet. Maybe some sadness. But then again, it's a black and white picture, right? If it was a colored picture, it might tell us a slightly different story. How about this here? Well, this guy looks like he's stuck out somewhere, so maybe he's, you know, alone, forsaken. It's a little bit harder to describe. This one, you're looking up and you've got all these trees around you. How does that make you feel? Maybe a little bit claustrophobic almost, like the trees are closing in on you. And this last picture here, the girl here looks maybe a little sad. She's thinking about something, thoughtful, I guess, something like that. Another word is pensive. Yeah, something along those lines. All right. Well, hey guys, thank you for coming to the session or watching the session here. And again, practice everything here. Once you've watched the session, please, go over it again on the PDF file. Make sure you understand all the concepts on it. If you can do that, you should do well on next week's test. Hope you guys have an awesome weekend, and God bless and have a great day. Bye for now.